Hello, and welcome along to the next in our series of videos where we are setting up Chocolatey in the organization. Now, in the previous two videos, the last two videos, we have installed the Chocolatey Central Management Database and the Chocolatey Central Management Service. And in this one, we are looking at setting up the Chocolatey Management website. So let's just get straight in. So this is another machine that I have. So just to ensure that we're all on the same page, this is a fresh machine. The only thing I've done to it is I've run the client setup script that we did in the previous video, which was to install Chocolatey and a couple of packages from our Nexus repository. And that's it. That's all I've done on here. So in terms of the documentation, again, there is comprehensive documentation on installing the Chocolatey Central Management website. So I'd encourage you to take a look at it. Now we're going to step through it. The main stumbling block that some folks have is the SQL Server connection string that's passed in. So we were able to get that working on the CCM service. So I'm quite happy that it's going to get to work here. But if you are running into any issues, there are different scenarios that are broken down in this documentation, and I just make sure that all that stuff is set up the way you expect it to be. So on this website setup, there's a little bit more configuration to do, mainly because we need to get IIS installed and we need to install a couple of supporting packages. So I'm just going to go ahead and kick that off because it will take a little second to get that done, and we'll talk through what it's doing. So up here, it is going to install. It's going to set up and install IIS. It's going to install the ASP.NET Core Runtime Package Store and the .NET Core Windows Hosting Packages. So those are packages that are specifically needed to host the CCM website within IIS. Now, the added portion down here is we're then going to pin those two packages, the ASP.NET Core Runtime Package Store and the .NET Core Windows Hosting Package. We're going to pin those to the version that's installed so that they don't get upgraded as part of some infrastructure work that you may have set up on your machines. Basically, at this point in time, the 0.3.0 version of CCM needs version 2.2.7 of these two packages. So that's why we are additionally pinning those two. We're using those two pin commands to make sure that that is adhered to. Okay. In future versions of CCM, those versions will change as we change the base frameworks, but there'll be documentation around the upgrade path to cover that. So while that's getting everything set up, we can start looking through the package parameters. So in the same way that in the service package, there's various different package parameters that you can pass in. By default, the website will be run under a dedicated application pool, and that application pool will be set to run with a name of Chocolatey Central Management with a username and password associated with that. So if you want to run the application pool with a specific username and password, you absolutely can do that. You need to pass in a connection string, which we spoke about in the previous video, and we need to make sure that that is correct. So in my instance, I'm using SQL Server authentication, so I'm going to need to pass in a username and password into the connection string. If you have chosen to rename the database from the default, you'll need to pass that in, or you'll need to pass in the entire connection string or a database and a SQL Server instance name. And that's about it. So in terms of what this package is going to do, it's going to create a new IIS website in IIS server. So once all of that's set up, it's going to create a new IIS website. It's going to have an application pool associated with that. And then it is going to take the files within the web package and it's going to place them into the folder that that website has been configured under. And once that's done, once the website's running, we'll have a little bit of setup to do, but we'll come to that in a bit. While all those components are installing, we will just talk through the different scenarios. So depending on whether you're using Active Directory, a local Windows account, or a SQL Server account, attaching to a local database, attaching to a remote database, there are different connection strings and different scenarios here. So the one that we're going to use is we're using SQL Express and we are connecting to it on a remote machine. So this is the connection string that we're going to want to do. So I'm going to copy this one and I'm going to move over to Notepad and paste it into here, because the password that I chose to use isn't quite this one. I went with a different one, which is something you should never use. You should be using nice, long, complicated passwords that is hosted in some sort of package password management solution. And for me, the server name is going to be CCMDB. So this is the part that trips up a lot of folks when they're installing CCM. So the documentation, we hope that the documentation is clear and it's broken down into the different scenarios that we see people doing. So have a look. If there are any concerns, questions, reach out to the support team and we'll definitely be able to help you out. So let's see where this has got to. We are at the ASP.NET Core runtime package, so we're getting close. So in terms of what we're installing, we are on this one. So we've got one more package to do after that, and then we'll be able to install the actual website package itself. So let's let this finish out, and then we should be able to install the package. And then once that's done, we should then be in a position to start having Chocolatey clients with the Chocolatey agent configured and set up to be able to check in to CCM. So this is the final package. I'll let this finish out. This shouldn't take too long, so I'm not going to pause the video for this because it should literally just finish in the next little while. And if we scroll down here, there is a little bit of setup afterwards. So we need to log into the website. When you log in with the default username and password, you will be presented with to change your password, so you need to change it to be something else. And then there's steps here in terms of setting up SMTP configuration and a couple of other things to make everything work the way we expect it to. So we'll walk through that once we get it installed. I don't currently have an SMTP server, but what I'm going to do while I think about it, while that's running, where's my workstation machine? I'm going to go back to my workstation machine here, and I'm going to internalize a package. So there's a very useful package for this sort of thing called Papercut. So Papercut is a small utility that mimics an SMTP server. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that that's called Papercut, and I'm going to download and internalize and put that onto my internal feed ready for consuming that. So that is the one that I want. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say build with parameters, and the parameter that I'm going to give it is Papercut, and I'm going to go ahead and let that run. So by the time I come back to this one, we should have the Papercut application ready to be used. So we'll come back to that once this is finished. Okay, so the website is now installed correctly. So in terms of verifying that everything worked, it says open a browser and look at localhost. So let's give that a try. So we'll come up to here and we will look at localhost. So if we do that, that's not what I expected. But let's refresh this page so it's not that. Okay, so let's look in iNet Manager and see what's going on there. There have been some known issues with regard to the default website, but I thought we had taken care of that. Oh no, hold on. No, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. That's just the prerequisites. So we haven't actually installed the package yet, so apologies. What I need to do is I need to copy this command and I need to run the installation of the package. So that's why it didn't do what I wanted it to do, because it hadn't actually installed it yet. So let's put all that back to the way it was and let's let it actually install. That's not right either though, hold on. Should ever do a Control-C. It's installing the service. Did I pick the wrong package, or is that an error in our documentation? That's an error in our documentation. I should I should get that fixed. Web docs are wrong. So on the first example here, it does Chocolatey install Chocolatey management web, but in the subsequent ones, it's doing service. So that's a error in our documentation. So I need to fix that. But if I go back to here and I change that to be web and copy that again, then we should install the right thing. So I'm going to fix that. Depending on when you come to this, that might already be fixed, but if it's not, just be careful that depending on which command that you copy there, it may be installing the wrong package name. So just something to be aware of. Now, while that's running, I'm just going to take a sneaky peek back at what was going on here. That's completed. So if we go over to our repository, we should hopefully have a new package in here. We've got Papercut here in our test repository, and depending on whether I've given it enough time, that Papercut package has now been copied over into our production repository as well. So that package is now ready to be used for our SMTP configuration. So I will come to that when we come to that in the documentation section. So this package will check to make sure that it can communicate with the database before it does anything, which it's done that. It's persisting that information into the app settings, so JSON file, and then we're being mentioned that some environment variables have changed, so we might need to refresh our browser, refresh the PowerShell session in order to take advantage of those. But for what we need, this should hopefully finish out. This should hopefully finish out. There we go. And it succeeded. Okay, so this time, if I go back to the browser and I go into HTTP localhost, this time we shouldn't see the default IIS website. We should hopefully see our CCM website. There we go, Chocolatey Central Management, and there we have the login screen of CCM. So far so good. The other verification steps that to make sure that everything was working, it should be possible to log into the site with the default credentials. We'll try that in a minute. The installation folder is in C Tools by default. So let's just open that up to make sure that everything looks good. So in C Tools, we've got Chocolatey Management Web, and these are all the files that are the website. So they look good, they're in the right place. And the website log file is located in that folder under app data logs. And a quick sanity check of the log file, make sure that there aren't any obvious errors being attributed, so that's good. And then the other verification is, so that's it. So now we need to log in. So the default username and password is CCM admin and 123QWE. So if we come over here and do CCM admin and 123QWE, we should be prompted to change that password to be a different one, which we are. So I'm going to pick a password that I'm going to be able to remember. I'm going to click submit. And then we should be logged in to CCM. Now, as of now, we don't have any machines checking into this. So there's no information. So down the left-hand side here, we'll have computers, we'll have software. All of these are going to be empty. There's not going to be any data in them because there's no machines reporting into CCM. So there's no information about that. But what we can see straight away is that in terms of our license that we have, the valid license that we have is available for 35 machines. So we're currently using 0 of the 35 machines that we're allowed. So it feels to me like things are up and running. So if we jump back to the documentation, there's a section around SMTP configuration. So that is within the administration section. And if we go into settings, then there is an email SMTP section. So by default, it will look for an SMTP host on the local machine with the default port of 25. Now, I don't have one on this machine. So if I say send test email, this will ultimately result in an error, and that's to be expected. But depending on what we're doing, whether we're registering new users, we're asking for a forgotten password, that sort of thing, it is going to want to send email. So I'm going to do choco install papercut, which we added into our repository using our Jenkins process that we have. And this will pretend to be an SMTP server. So it'll intercept any traffic on the default port 25, and it'll capture those emails into Papercut. So I'm going to install this just for testing purposes to make sure that if there are any emails sent out, that we capture those and we can see what it's trying to tell us. So we'll get that installed. And with that done, I should be able to run Papercut. So it's a small utility that it does have a UI, but it runs in the toolbar as well. So this is it here. And if we go back to that SMTP and say send test email, let's get rid of these notifications, send test email, it shouldn't error this time. So it's now saying test email has successfully sent. And we've got a pop-up saying message received, and this is a test email. So that's literally an email coming from Chocolatey Central Management, and this is a test email. So we've done that part of the configuration as well. Obviously, if you're using a different server, you would need to provide the host, SMTP host, the port number that you're using, what credentials you need to use, etc. So I'm just using a bog standard, unauthenticated SMTP on port 25. That's probably not what you're using, but that's what I'm using. Okay, so that's the SMTP configuration. The ASP.json configuration. This part we shouldn't need to do, but let's have a quick talk through it anyway. There we go. There was a slight delay in my machine there. So the app settings.json file that it's talking about is in the Chocolatey Management Web folder in tools. So there is an app settings.json file here. And like I say, I don't have much of a text editor yet, but if we open, don't save that, but if we open the C tools management and Chocolatey management, and in here, look at that app settings.json file, which is here. So this is where the information is I spoke about before is persisted. So it's persisted in an encrypted form. And the other piece of information that's required is the website root address. So on my machine, I'm using the fully qualified domain name of this machine, which is just CCM Web. If you are using a different if you're using like a vanity URL or a different host name for accessing CCM, you can come in here and you can change this. So you would just replace the section in here with the non-secure version, so just the HTTP, whatever the URL is, and then that will be encrypted the next time it runs. So that's what this section is about. It's stating that you can change that if you need to. There are other settings here. The CCM website has Captchas available. So if you want to have a Captcha pop up when the user registers with the website, you can absolutely do that. You need to provide those information for that to run. So if you need to, you can augment the app settings.json file with that. I'm not going to set that up because we don't need to. But for now, I think that's us up and running. So we've now got a working version of CCM in my environment. The next part will be to have machines, client machines, Chocolatey client machines, starting to report into this machine with the information. So that's going to be in the next video. And that's it for now, I think. So any questions about what we've done here, feel free to reach out in the comments or hit me up on Twitter and I'll answer any questions that I can. But for now, thank you very much.